Hi and welcome to the National Museum of Scotland. My name is Stephen Allen. I'm Head of Learning and Programmes here, but I've also been for the last couple of years curating the exhibition Rip It Up, the Story of Scottish Pop. And in some ways there's no better way of introducing it than with Alex Harvey. Alex Harvey is often cited by musicians over the past few decades as being a seminal influence, and his career really did span the origin of Scottish pop music, Scottish pop and rock, from the dance halls of Glasgow and Edinburgh and around Scotland up to the New Wave period. Alex was really much a working musician. He formed a soul band in the early 1960s, backed the touring American musicians. He recorded what's thought of very often as being the first Scottish rock and roll album. He went down to London, was actually the original cast of the musical Hair, so he supported and worked with lots of the prominent musicians of the day. He formed the sensational Alex Harvey Band in the early 1970s, had great critical success. The big commercial success maybe eluded him, but he was an incredibly theatrical performer who his live performances were legendary. He supported Slade in the early 1970s, and so the story goes was quite often quoted by the fans as having outperformed and upstaged them. He unfortunately died in 1982, too prematurely, too young for some of his great talent. And even though he mightn't have had the sort of huge #1 hits and singles that many later Scottish artists did, many of them talk about how his performance, his energy really was their starting point for their own career in pop music. So if you talk to like of Richard Jobson or people like Ian Rankin, they would always cite him as being the premier Scottish pop performer. Well, now we're in the New Wave section. It's a period where music was really revolutionised and changed. A do-it-yourself ethos to music, with the growth of punk and indeed the post-punk period. And this is a case and display which is really close to my heart, which is the Rezillos. The Rezillos were, and later the Revillos, were at the time quite a short-lived band, though they've reformed and are performing today. And personally, they were one of my favourite bands of that era, one of my first early favourite bands, formed around the Edinburgh College of Art, and their art school influence is really visible here, with the costumes that they made themselves. You've got the green PVC outfit worn by singer Eugene Reynolds on Top of the Pops, singing Top of the Pops, which I vividly remember. Indeed, the images are very vivid. And a costume designed and worn by the singer Faye Fife. And these, along with the music, really capture the inventiveness and energy of this band, who were fairly unashamed pop, that were fairly unashamed punk, secured a major record deal, released a fantastic album, debut album, and then they soon split up, as is the case with many bands. However, they have reformed over the years, and they've just completed, I think, a sellout tour over the last few months. Still performing, still being creative, innovative. Here we are in front of a case for altered images, and altered images perfectly illustrate that transition from sort of new wave to this bright, shiny pop of the early 1980s. They were formed in the late 1970s in Glasgow, and the lead singer Clare Grogan was also an actor, so we have on display here her original script from the starring role in Gregory's Girl, directed by Bill Forsyth, along with a costume that she herself designed and had made and designed for her in the early 1980s. She really was the sort of cover star of the period, along with her band. And they were originally sort of taken up by the sort of quite dark, gothish band Susie and the Banshees, who supported and produced their first single. But they then made that break into the world of smash hits and Record Mirror. And had a series of hit singles, and again, Clare and Altered Images are still performing regularly. Okay, we're in the section Going Global, which are those those bands from Scotland who've had an international impact, you know, the likes of Midure and Ultravox, Wet Wet Wet, Annie Lennox, Katie Tunstall, Biffy Clyro, but there's no better way of starting introducing that section than here with the Bay City Rollers. Bay City Rollers were a group of young lads from Edinburgh who were performing around Edinburgh in the clubs and bars, and they were picked up for international stardom, teamed up with the best songwriters of the day. And they were the biggest band really since the Beatles. They were the first band since the Beatles to have their own mania, in this case, Roller Mania. They customised their stage outfits to have this tartan trim, which was then picked up by their own fans, by the actually adoring fans, and really sort of universalised and made global sort of tartan as a brand in relation to pop music. They have been cited by the Ramones as a sort of almost like a sort of forerunner of that sort of 2-3 minute sort of power punk sort of style, and they actually had a lot of quite a long period of success in the UK. Then they broke America, and then they broke Australia, New Zealand, Japan. They had their own TV series, and they really were sort of 5 or 6 years amongst sort of the most successful bands in the world. Still in the Going Global section, we have someone who really has had a massive global influence on pop music. Midure, first of all, from his time in Ultravox, we have here what I think is an absolute iconic object, which is the Burberry Raincoat he wore in the 1981 video for the hit single Vienna. Actually filmed in Covent Garden and Kilburn in London, so maybe less glamorous than the Vienna location they were singing about. But when we borrowed this from Midge, it had been, I think, sort of tucked away in the back of his wardrobe for the last 30 years. So he was delighted for us to display it, and indeed to have it sort of dry cleaned and steam ironed as well. Midure was, of course, had such a massive impact on global music, as the co-producer, co-writer of the 1984 Band Aid single Do They Know It's Christmas, and of course the following year of the Live Aid concert in Wembley Stadium, which really did change the face of music forever. And here we have the coat and guitar he wore whilst and played whilst performing, along with a signed letter from the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, thanking his contribution, and a copy of the DVD, the best-selling DVD of the Live Aid concert. So both as an individual performer, but also that global impact he's had, he really deserves his place in this section. Shirley Munson exemplifies the idea of a global superstar. She began her career with the Edinburgh-based indie band Goodbye Mr. Mackenzie, who enjoyed great critical success, but not the commercial success that she later went on to with Garbage. She joined in the mid-1990s. She has co-written and sung on many of the albums and hits. In fact, this year is the 20th anniversary of the sort of version 2, which is really their breakthrough album, and we're delighted to be displaying the costume that she wore on that. She went on to be one of only 3 Scottish singers to have recorded a Bond theme tune, and Garbage really have had massive international success over the last 20-25 years. Biffy Clyro, originally from Kilmarnock, formed in the mid-1990s, are one of the sort of great stadium fillers of today, one of the favourite bands across the world. We have on display a range of flags that are thrown on stage by fans, which they've collected. There are a huge number of those flags, and they just show a sort of selection of the international appeal of the band. And one of my favourite objects in the whole exhibition is the guitar that was burnt on stage by Simon, by the singer and guitarist Simon, at the Reading Festival in 2013, and its sort of charred remains really sort of show the sort of energy and theatricality of this fantastic band, along with a pair of trousers, silver glittery trousers that Simon wore on stage on tour in 2017. We're in the final section of the exhibition, Scottish Voices. It's a section that we try and look at maybe what makes Scottish pop music distinct, what sets it apart, what its key influences are. So it could be folk music, and the influence of folk music over the years, its continuing influence. It could be about identity and politics, about social justice, about a landscape and a sense of place. And here, there's no better way of starting this section with the Proclaimers. A band who, when they emerged in the early 1980s, in some ways are quite revolutionary. They sang, the Reed brothers, Charlie and Craig, sang with their own accent, sang about those distinctly Scottish subjects of the time, the impact of mass unemployment and industrial change. And they really were quite sort of forthright in how they presented themselves. They've gone on, of course, to be one of Scotland's one of the UK's sort of most sort of favourite bands, but I think that here that you can see really their origins as a sort of performing duo, and I like in particular the cassette tapes that we got displayed, which were some of their early demos, some of their early songs that they sent out to record labels and bands, and they were picked up by a band at the time, the House Martins, who took them on tour with them and really gave them their first step onto stardom. They appeared on The Tube, which is the music programme of the day, and that really also brought them to much wider attention of major record labels. And they went on to record their first album and have had nearly 25 years of success after that. We've only been able to show just a selection of some of the material we've got here at the exhibition. The exhibition, Ripping Up the Story of Scottish Pop, is on until Sunday the 25th of November. But also look at our website and you'll see details of the remaining talks, events and activities that we've got on. Not least the Museum Late, which is on Friday the 16th of November, where we're delighted to have the Pastels and Sacred Paws performing, as well as other talks and activities in the course of the evening. So I hope to see you here, and I hope you enjoy the exhibition.